My journal on Hinduism. When I went into this section, I went into it understanding a little bit about Hinduism, things that I learned from my undergrad. And so when I went to go pick an essay to read, I was originally drawn to the essay in chapter 19, Hinduism for Hindus, Taking Back Hindu Studies. And as a person who's very interested in what does it look like when corruption happens and when different people take on other religious practices for their gain, and when it's taught, what happens when those religions are taught by people who are not practitioners of that religion or people who, in other words, co-opted that. And so I became drawn to this topic, this chapter. And the chapter actually starts off with a quote from Audre Lorde, which is simple: "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." I believe that was a very interesting way to start the tone for this essay. And this essay is very intriguing, very powerful. It brings up a lot of discourse, a lot of pedagogy between Hindu students and the Hindu community and how things are taught and what's taught. So actually what I want to do is just read one section in the essay and discuss it a little bit. And this section appears on page 277. Coming to know India's past must become part of the critical pedagogy of decolonizing Hindu studies. This must be accomplished by creating an alternative history of Hinduism, which in turn will generate alternative pathways to knowledge about Hinduism. Is the history of Hinduism, it is modernist and Western construction, relevant, useful to Hindus today? For most Hindus, the answer would seem to be self-evident because they assume that the truth comes out. A true account of Hinduism will be given. Wrong. How, when to write a new history of Hinduism in India? Particularly when Aim Caesar observed in his discourse on colonialism that the only history is white. How can the Hindu find his or her voice? Can the Hindu semblance speak? I think a beginning must be made by rising and debating issues that have to do with taking back Hindu history and studies to that objective it is possibly to exploitative from the urgent claims that Spike speaks it. Can the subtlet speak? Via the critical theory of Theodore Adorno, following Hindus in the diaspora and academies and studies of Hinduism in India must begin by asking, who does research in Hinduism? Who funds, defines, and owns such research? Whose interests does it serve? Who benefits from it? Who designs the research framework, the questionnaire, and frames the scope of this research? Who carries it through and writes it up? How are its results dismantled or disseminated? This section, this whole essay is framed with a conversation of what is Hindu studies really? And it kind of caused me to question everything I know about Hinduism, every aspect, everything I learned in the light of understanding Hinduism through the lens in which it's been brought down to us. That's through the lens of a colonizer and colonization. And that to me was fascinating. Almost in the sense of when I think about Hinduism and how I've learned about Hinduism as a religion of duty. And this concept of caste systems. And all of that is true. But this essay caused me to, and continues to cause me to question who is telling the story and why often is the caste system showed in the light in which it's shown versus, or I've not often asked the question, who's telling the story? What is the Hindu's mindset in this? What, particularly the Indian Hindu, the brown person, what are they thinking? How does it? Are they just being a good person, following their duty, or are they living in and embodying what they believe to be true? And these questions are the questions that I typically would ask, or are exact some of the very questions that I would ask in this section. Who does research in Hinduism? Who funds? Who defines? Who owns this? And when I read these things and when I think of these things, I am curious of what would ethical research and protocols and look like. And this is discussed a little bit more in the essay. And so how do we get like-minded people together to look at and discuss and find these things? So I suppose overall I was really drawn to this essay because of Audre Lorde being quoted in this, but also because of this pedagogy of history being white, or history constantly being whitewashed, and the information we gather is not true information. It's information that has been disseminated from other peoples. Thank you.